Everyone remembers Luke, Han and Leia, but not all heroes wear capes or wield lightsabers. Some operate in the shadows.
I've given up all chance at inner peace. I made my mind a sunless space.
Luthen Rael isn't just another rebel fighting for the cause, he's the architect of the rebellion, the mastermind that made it all possible. And in Andor Season 2, his grand plan is about to unfold.
I'm thinking like a soldier.
Think like a leader.
But what if I told you that without Luthen, the Empire never would have fallen? That everything from Mon Mothma's defection to the victory at Endor was all part of a bigger scheme. The truth is, Luthen wasn't just fighting the Empire, he was manipulating it, forcing it into overreach. And his biggest move yet is coming in Season 2.
People will suffer.
That's the plan.
Before we jump in, don't forget to leave a thumbs up on today's video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you want to catch more Star Wars content just like this, then you're in the right place. Now without further ado, let's dive into Andor Season 2 and how Luthen Rael really is the hero of the rebellion.
The ego that started this fight will never have a mirror or an audience or the light of gratitude. So what do I sacrifice? Everything!
Alright, so Luthen Rael isn't your typical Star Wars hero. He doesn't swing a lightsaber, wear Jedi robes, or rally crowds with impassioned speeches, but make no mistake, he's the one pulling the strings. If the rebellion is a galaxy-spanning movement, he's the one that lit the first spark and fanned the flames from behind the scenes. And in Andor Season 1, we saw just how far he's willing to go to make that fire spread. On the surface, he's an antique dealer on Coruscant, calm, polished, and completely unassuming, but behind that shopfront, he's quietly building an underground network of resistance, one connection at a time. He doesn't just fight the Empire, he manipulates it, plays its arrogance against itself, and uses every overreach as fuel for rebellion. Now it starts with Cassian Andor. Luthen spots him, not just as a survivor, but as someone who could become a threat to the Empire if pointed in the right direction.
I came looking for something more and I think I found it.
He brings him into the fold, kicks off Cassian's journey toward becoming the spy we later see in Rogue One, and more importantly, gives him purpose, but Cassian's just the beginning. Luthen has an informant inside the ISB, Lonnie, someone feeding him classified intel right from the Empire's core. And to protect that source, Luthen's willing to make difficult choices. When the ISB gets wind of a rebel attack at the Spellhouse facility, Luthen doesn't warn the rebels, he lets them walk right into the trap and die, because saving one informant is more valuable than saving dozens of fighters. That moment alone tells us a lot about who Luthen really is. It's not about short-term victories, it's about keeping the bigger game in motion. And that game gets even more intense with the Aldhani heist. On the surface, it's about stealing the Empire's payroll, but really it's a statement, a message to the entire galaxy that the Empire isn't untouchable. Luthen wants the Empire to crack down harder afterwards. He knows that the tighter the Empire squeezes, the more people will rebel. And if they don't feel oppressed yet, well, Luthen's actions are going to make sure they do. He even tries to unify the fractured rebel landscape, reaching out to Saw Gerrera in hopes of bringing him into the network a bit more. But Saw being Saw isn't exactly a team player. Still, Luthen keeps building every piece of the puzzle slowly falling into place, and even if the players don't realise they're part of a bigger game yet, Luthen does. Even Mon Mothma, one of the rebellion's most visible leaders, is caught in his web. She's secretly funding the movement through a family fortune, but Luthen is the one deciding how that money's used, and he's not interested in clean politics. Anyway, their alliance is uneasy, full of tension, and you get the sense that even she doesn't know how far he's willing to go.
You told me we were building a network.
What were my words?
This is something else entirely.
And that's the thing, Luthen already knows he won't be around to see the rebellion win. His entire arc is built around this brutal awareness that he's lighting a fire that will burn long after he's gone. He's not looking for glory, he's looking for change, and he's willing to sacrifice everything, including himself, to make it happen. So, heading into Season 2, all of these threads are tightening, and the seeds he's planted are now beginning to bloom, and his next move may be his boldest yet. Now, as the rebellion gains momentum, you can feel the galaxy shifting. What began as isolated flashes of resistance on places like Ferrix and Aldhani is slowly becoming something more, a coordinated movement. With purpose and direction, the Empire senses it too. That's why we're seeing them clamp down harder, lashing out in fear. But the thing is, that's exactly what Luthen wants, because to him, rebellion isn't something you wait for, it's something you ignite. And if that means pushing the Empire into overreach, if it means letting them show the galaxy just how brutal they really are, then so be it. In Luthen's mind, the more the Empire oppresses, the more people will fight back. It's a risky game, but it's one he's been playing from the very start, and the more successful the movement becomes, the more dangerous those methods get.
The quarterly payroll for an entire Imperial site.
Sacrifice becomes strategy, martyrs become currency. And suddenly even those in his close circle like Mon Mothma are starting to question how far he's willing to go. She still believes in clean rebellion, he believes in winning, and as the stakes rise, so does the tension between them. Anyway, she's still sugaring his cake at the moment, if that's the right way to put it, as she pumps funds into his operation, but she doesn't agree with all of it, to say the least. You can see it in the way she reacts to his talk of calculated losses. To her, these are lives. To him, they're necessary costs, and that clash between idealism and cold strategy is only going to grow.
I'm afraid I won't be taking either of these pieces this morning.
Because in Season 2 we're heading toward one of the darkest and most defining moments in the rebellion's origin, the Gorman massacre, and Luthen might have more to do with it than you think. So far we've seen how Luthen's been playing the long game, manipulating events from the shadows, building the rebellion piece by piece, but what if one of his most important moves hasn't even happened yet? Throughout the Andor Season 2 trailer, we keep cutting back to one specific moment that keeps resurfacing, protesters gathering in what looks like the Gorman town square. Stormtroopers are already on edge, and you can just feel the tension in the air. It's chaos waiting to happen. And if you've been keeping tabs on canon, legends, and just general behind-the-scenes info, then you'll know this isn't just any protest, this is the Gorman massacre. The events that shift the entire rebellion. Now, Gorman was name-dropped in Season 1, and it's been confirmed it'll play a major role across multiple episodes in Season 2. It's largely remembered as one of the most important tragedies in Star Wars history, where the Empire quite literally crushed a peaceful protest on Gorman, like Tarkin literally landed his ship on a bunch of them. But what's interesting is, in the trailer, it doesn't look like this massacre starts out of nowhere. In fact, there's a series of blink and you'll miss it shots that suggest something much more calculated is going on. We see both Clea and Cassian arriving at the site before the protest begins, both of them carrying briefcases, and when you match that with the explosions shown later in the same shots, it's all becoming pretty clear. These cases weren't just carrying supplies, they were carrying bombs. Which raises the theory, what if the Gorman protest wasn't just a peaceful sit-in, but a calculated move by Luthen? What if he ordered the rebels to use the protest as cover for an attack, knowing the Empire would overreact?
Oppression breeds rebellion.
Because that's exactly what he said he wanted in Season 1. The Empire needs to be provoked. They need to come down harder. The more brutal they become, the more people will rise up. And if Gorman is the match that lights the fire, then Luthen may have been the one to struck it, knowing full well what the cost would have been. For Mon Mothma, this becomes the moment that changes everything. Up until now, she's clung to diplomacy, believing the system could be saved. But Gorman destroys that illusion. The Empire doesn't negotiate, it doesn't listen, it crushes. And that's what pushes her to deliver that now famous speech denouncing the Emperor and stepping away from the Senate, giving birth to the Rebel Alliance. But if this theory is true, it's also the result of a tragedy Luthen helped create, and you can't help but wonder, did Mon Mothma really know the full story of what went down?
It was you, wasn't it?
I explained to you the risk.
Anyway, so at this point, everything we've seen about Luthen, the manipulation, the orchestration, the cold strategic brilliance, starts to take on new weight, because if the Gorman massacre really does happen under his direction, or at least because of his influence, this isn't just another example of him playing the long game, this is him crossing the line, fully, deliberately, and this is where things start to get dark. We already know Luthen believes that the only way to make the Empire fall is to force it to expose itself, make it crack down so brutally that the galaxy has no choice but to rise up. And if that's what Gorman represents, if that massacre was deliberately provoked by Luthen to push figures like Mon Mothma over the edge, then the stakes go beyond rebellion. This isn't just strategy anymore, it's sacrifice on a scale that starts to mirror the very cruelty he's fighting against. And that's where Season 2 gets incredibly personal, because we're not just dealing with tactical escalation here, we're heading into Luthen's backstory. Tony Gilroy's confirmed that we're finally going to learn who this man really is, and I have a feeling that's going to reshape everything. Right now, Luthen feels untouchable, calculated, hardened, but what if this wasn't always the case?
I'm not slipping, Clea. I've just been hiding for too long.
What if he was once just your everyday guy trying to live a quiet life under Imperial rule, maybe even with a family? A life that was shattered, a man who lost everything. I wouldn't be surprised if the Empire destroyed that life, took away his family, his home, his future, and what we're seeing now, this cold, calculating rebel leader, that's not who he always was, it's who he became.
I'm not slipping.
Because if you've got nothing left to lose, pushing a galaxy into war suddenly doesn't feel like a step too far, and that, I think, is the real tragedy of Luthen. But here's the thing, if he's willing to let innocent people die, if he truly believes that sacrificing civilians is justified to further the cause, then at what point does he stop being a revolutionary and start becoming something else?
You're trapped, Lonnie. There's no pleasure in saying it, but you're going nowhere.
That's the big question Season 2's gonna make us ask, because Luthen isn't just fighting a war against the Empire, he's walking a thin line between savior and terrorist, and if he's the one behind Gorman, then the rebellion as we know it, the one Mon Mothma eventually leads, might owe everything to a man they can't afford to acknowledge. And that's where his future becomes a ticking clock, because if he's the reason the rebellion exists, but also the thing that threatens what it stands for, then maybe his fate won't be sealed by the Empire at all. Maybe it will be decided by the very people we helped create.
There's no way out alive. Of that you must be sure.
He's not just building a movement here, he's shaping it, and that comes with consequences, because if you believe that oppression breeds rebellion, and you spend your life proving that theory, then eventually that same logic has to apply to you. Luthen might be the spark that lights the fire, but what happens when the fire no longer needs him? Now here's where things get pretty wild, because if everything we've said up until this point is true, if Luthen has spent years manipulating the Empire into cracking down, sacrificing lives to spark rebellion, then we've got to ask the next question: what happens when the rebellion no longer needs him? Right now, Luthen is the one calling the shots. He decides who lives, who dies, and who's worth sacrificing in the name of the cause. But movements like this don't stay small forever, and as the rebellion starts to take shape into something more organised, something with leadership, structure, and public support, Luthen's methods start looking less like strategy and more like a liability. His ideology has no brakes. He's made peace with moral compromise. But other leading figures in the cause, they haven't, and certainly not Mon Mothma. We already know she's uncomfortable with what he's doing. She funds him, yeah, sure, but she's visibly shaken by the cost. She wants to build something that reflects hope and unity, whereas Luthen's building something that wins.
This has to be a win, Val.
And when those two visions collide, only one of them can ultimately survive, which leads to the most chilling possibility of all. What if the rebellion turns on him? No, not because he failed, but because he succeeded too well. Because the moment Luthen's work starts to threaten the future of the movement, the very people he brought into it might be forced to take him out. And while there's a few out there that could be tasked with it, there's one that stands out: Cassian, the very man Luthen recruited, the man who largely embodies his idea, it seems, by the time Rogue One happens, could be the one who ends him.
Kill me. Or take me in.
And that brings us back to something Luthen himself said.
I burn my life to make a sunrise that I know I'll never see.
What if that wasn't just poetic self-pity, but what if it's the truth? That for the rebellion to stand, for Mon Mothma's vision to survive, for Leia to one day lead the resistance, Luthen has to die, because without him, there is no rebellion, but without his death, the rebellion might never become something the galaxy can truly believe in. His sacrifice becomes its foundation, not just symbolically, but also structurally. He built the framework, he lit the fire, but to protect what comes next. The fire can't burn forever, and maybe Luthen knows that. Maybe that's been his plan all along. So yeah, when you really look at it, Luthen isn't just a shadow figure lurking behind the scenes. He's the spark and the accelerant. Like, this guy doesn't just push the rebellion into motion, he forces it to exist. Every decision he makes, every sacrifice he's willing to endure, it all builds towards something bigger than himself. The movement doesn't just happen around him, it happens because of him. But the tragedy is that his legacy might only survive if he doesn't, and that's what makes Luthen so compelling. He creates the world that eventually defeats the Empire, but there might not be a place for him in it.
I'm damned for what I do.
And that's what hits hardest for me. His rebellion doesn't stop with Aldhani or even Gorman. It leads directly to Andor. That victory gives rise to the New Republic. And from that, Leia grows into a leader who eventually forms the Resistance and goes on to challenge the First Order. So in a way, Luthen's influence isn't just limited to Andor. His actions ripple through the entire saga. The galaxy only gets its sunrise because he chose to burn in the dark. So do you think Luthen makes it out of Season 2 alive? And more importantly, should he? As always, drop your thoughts, theories, and wildest speculations down in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to check out our last one where we dive into how B2's story could completely change Rogue One. Anyways, don't forget to leave a thumbs up and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss anything upcoming. Thanks for watching, I'll see you in the next one, and may the Force be with you.